and then there are 2 applications which we will hear this evening. So the opening statement says, "This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment, which is being held on Wednesday, the 27th of October, 2017, at 7:30 p.m. in the municipal complex. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this regular meeting has been provided by prominently displaying the schedule of regular meetings on the official notice board in the municipal complex, and by transmitting a copy of this schedule to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Trenton Times, and the Trentonian, and to Comcast Cable of New Jersey Incorporated. A copy was also filed with the clerk of Princeton." Could you call the roll call for us, please, Tony?
Mr. Cohen?
Present.
Mr. Colson? Mr. Floyd? Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Mr. Oakman? Chairman Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber?
Yes.
Ms. Suri? Mr. Tenema? Thank you.
Good. So we've got the housekeeping parts here, the first of which is the minutes, which are circulated in your package. Those are the minutes for the June the 28th, 2017 meeting, regular meeting. Are there any modifications to the text that were circulated that we need to make? Any spelling errors that you discovered? If not, then I would like a motion to accept, and a seconder to that motion.
I move to accept.
So we have a motion to accept. Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a seconder. Can you call the roll for us, then?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Colson?
Yes.
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Mr. Schreiber?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good. Now we have 2 memorializations, the first of which is 79 Coiler Road, which carries the case number, file number Z1717-501. Again, this was in the package you received. If there are any changes that need to be made, we should make them now. If not, I'll accept a motion and a second to approve as put in.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a seconder for the motion?
I'll second it.
We have a seconder for motion. Attorney will read the names of people here present who are permitted to say yea or nay.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Colson,
Yes.
Mr. Callahan,
Yes.
Chairman Royce.
Yes. And the second of these is 191 Snowden Lane with the file number Z1717-502. Are there any necessary changes in that?
I didn't see any. No.
So if there are no changes needed, can I have a motion to approve as presented and a seconder to that motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
So we have a motion to approve. Somebody who wishes to second?
I'll second it.
And we have a seconder. Our attorney will find out who of us can vote.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Colson,
Yes.
Mr. Callahan,
Yes.
Chairman Royce.
Yes. Okay. So that's the busy work gotten out of the way, important as it is. And we will now go to the applications, the first of which is 396 Mount Lucas with the case number Z1717-508. What I would do is to ask our Mr. Bridger to read the essence of his memo to the board into the record, and then I'll ask you to make your case. Of course. Good. Mr.
Thank you.
Bridger.
Good evening.
Mr.
You need to
Bridger,
be sworn, of course.
I'll note that the noticing is in order and the board has jurisdiction. If you'd raise your right hand, Mr. Bridger, you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Good evening. Application is made by Princeton Land Development, the owner and the applicant of 396 Mount Lucas Road, for variance relief to permit construction of a new single-family home on a non-conforming lot which does not meet the required lot width. Subject property is located in the RB zone, is subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with sections 10B, 253, 255, 246 of the former Princeton Township Land Use Ordinance. Subject lot is non-complying with respect to the required 200-foot lot width. The existing is 178. Existing dwelling will be demolished and a new structure will be constructed. House plans for the proposed dwelling have been requested. The applicant has informed staff that they do not have plans for the proposed house. The applicant should advise the board as to whether they have contacted any adjoining landowners, inquiring if they wish to buy the subject lot or sell a portion of their lot to create a complying lot. The applicants indicate that the new single-family dwelling will comply with all applicable bulk requirements. So after the front yard setback was applied, the prevailing front yard setback, they've determined that the lot width they're going to need to accommodate a house on this lot would be 171.45 square feet, where as the required is 200 feet, and they have requested a C1 variance. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Mr. Bridger? No. Mr. Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the zoning board. My name is Jason Hornlak. I'm from the law firm of Wisniewski and Associates. I represent the applicant, Princeton Land Development LLC, with respect to this application for property located at 396 Mount Lucas Road in Princeton, also known as Block 4201, Lot 16. Not going to repeat what Mr. Bridger just stated. He did a good job of summarizing this, but my client does propose to demolish what is currently now a single-family home and a detached garage, which also has living quarters that are on the property. The present use does not comply with the zoning, but is a pre-existing use that dates back, I think, to the early 1900s. So we're looking to demolish that and build a single-family home. We have bifurcated the application, so we come before you tonight only looking for the C1 variance. We are not looking for site plan approval at this time. You will hear from one witness tonight, gentleman sitting to my left, Mr. William O'Barra from Delaware Raritan Engineering. Mr. O'Barra is a licensed engineer and a certified planner, so he will be wearing two hats tonight and giving a presentation with respect to both. As jurisdiction has been accepted, if there are no further questions, I will like to call Mr. O'Barra.
Okay.
Mr. Barra, we need to swear you in. If you would raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
You may want to take the portable microphone
Yeah, if you're going to stand up, I'll...
if you're going to go to...
Oh, there we go. That works.
I'll just do a little housekeeping, just pass this around so the board can see a little better.
So you're passing us essentially the poster that we can see, is that right?
Exactly. This is just a colorized rendering of the plan that was submitted with your application.
Mr. Harlech, do you want to qualify Mr. O'Barra as an expert?
Yes. Okay. Mr. O'Barra, for the record, can you please describe your experience as both experience and expertise as both an engineer and a planner?
Certainly. I have an engineer's degree from the New Jersey Institute of Technology since 1997. I'm both a licensed planner and engineer in the state of New Jersey. I'm also a certified municipal engineer. I've been practicing for over 20 years. I've been testifying and been accepted as an expert witness through numerous boards throughout the state of New Jersey. I also have the pleasure of serving the Old Bridge Township Zoning Board as the board engineer, and my licenses are all in good standing. and I've prepared the plan that's before you this evening.
We had no trouble in accepting those qualifications.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Barra, can you please give a brief background as to the present uses of the property?
It's a single-family dwelling. On the left portion of the exhibit shows the existing 1.5-story dwelling, as well as the detached garage with a driveway along the western portion. Both the driveway and garage are presently over the existing property line and are not conforming to the side yard setbacks for either the detached structure or the principal structure as well. There's utilities that are available to the site along Mount Lucas Road, and it's presently accessed from Mount Lucas Road.
Okay. Mr. O'Barra, you are referencing an exhibit that you have on the board there. Can you just explain what that is?
Yeah, it's a colorized rendering of a variance plan that was last dated August 4th, 2017.
Okay, and that's the plan that was submitted to the board with the application?
That's correct.
Yes.
The property is located along the west side of Mount Lucas Road, approximately a quarter mile north of the intersection with Ewing Street. It consists of one 3.01 acre lot. It's located in the RB Residence District and is surrounded by residential uses with a Green Acres parcel along the west and back portion of the property. There's been some recent improvements installed along the front of the property by Princeton Township. There was some curb and an 8-foot wide walking path installed along the north side of that roadway.
That is there at the present time, or you're...
Correct.
It's there at the present
Yes.
time? Yeah.
And as I alluded to, the reason we're here, we're requesting relief from the lot width requirement. The property actually does have 200 feet or slightly over 200 feet of lot frontage as measured along Mount Lucas Road, but the property is somewhat irregularly shaped, as you can see better by looking at the tax map, where it's angled in as you go back on the property. So the way the ordinance measures the setback, that creates the need for technically a lot width variance. And the existing property, again, does not conform the way it stands now. Now, as part of our application, the detached garage and residential structure would be raised for the construction of a new single-family dwelling more centrally located on the property. That property has been, the location of that dwelling has been based on the prevailing setback of the surrounding properties as required by your ordinance. That's what drives the need for this property to be set back approximately 92 feet from Mount Lucas Road. And the size of the structure, we don't have any plans for development at this time, but it's generally typical of something of the area. Again, that's where, when we take your ordinance definition, it's 171.45 for the lot width. Now, technically, there's some environmental restrictions on the property as well. You'll notice this large portion in the back, which is much wider. So if this driveway were extended and the property and the dwelling were situated all the way in the back, technically we wouldn't need a lot width variance. But the reason we're not doing that is we have a current LOI on the property, and this back portion is encumbered by wetlands.
Yeah.
So that precludes us from remedying the situation in that manner.
Okay. So I know you stated that we don't have plans for the house yet, but from your rendering, there is a box where the proposed house would be placed on the new construction?
That's correct.
Okay. And is your testimony that that house can be built in accordance with all the regulations for the zone except for the one variance that we're requesting?
That's correct. There's adequate parking. We've demonstrated that a turnaround can be provided, so no one would have to back out onto Mount Lucas Road improving upon the existing condition. You'd have more regular access. In terms of site improvements, really the only improvement would be required would just be the modification of the driveway entrance along Mount Lucas Road. All the utility cuts are already available within Mount Lucas Road, so there'd be no new improvements required. And that would be
The house will have a garage built into it, is that correct?
correct.
Okay.
And then at such time that the actual development plan is brought forward,
No, I
yeah,
will.
but that would be subject to a detailed engineering review. So if there's any requirements from your engineering department or anything of that nature, those would all be brought forth at that point in time.
And the zoning officer in his letter, and then again tonight, talked about adjoining properties and the potential for either obtaining more land from them or selling the property to them. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Certainly. The property to the west, there's a small strip of land, and then which is attached to the large parcel behind it. That was recently acquired as open space by Princeton Municipality. It's encumbered by Green Acres, so it's something that I don't believe we have the ability to acquire. And the property to the east is an undersized existing lot with numerous variances for lot size, side yard setback, so we wouldn't be able to acquire any property from that adjoining property without exacerbating those existing nonconformities.
Okay. Mr. Barrow, I'm going to ask you now just to change hats and put on your planner hat. And if you can talk to and testify to the board about the variance and with respect to the positive and negative criteria with respect to our application.
Sure. If you bear with me, I'm just going to read from my notes so I can establish the record. The zone requires 200 feet of lot width, and the proposed construction would provide at least 171.45 feet per the ordinance. In terms of seeking to mitigate the hardship throughout acquisition of adjacent property, we would note the properties that I just discussed, the Green Acres to the west and the existing nonconformities to the property to the east, limit our ability to remedy the variance in that regard. It's my opinion the requested variances may be granted under the C1 hardship criteria where the irregular shape of the property and the narrowness as measured when the prevailing front yard setback is located drive the need for the variance in combination with the environmental limitations of the rear of the property, precluding the dwelling from being located farther back. It's further my opinion the strict application of the zoning regulation would result in the peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties or exceptional undue hardship upon the property owner. It's my opinion the irregular shape of the property in combination with the environmental restrictions imposed by the wetlands are unique to this property. Based on review of the tax map and the available wetlands mapping, these conditions are unique to this particular property and not consistent with the remainder of the surrounding area. This proposal would eliminate the existing nonconformities with respect to the side yard setbacks for both the primary access structure and also eliminate the parking side yard setback deficiency. In doing so, we believe this provides a more attractive, safer means of accessing the property from the roadway as well. The existing lot provides the required lot size, lot frontage, and additional land does not appear to be readily available to be acquired from the adjacent previously developed properties without creating a need for further relief. It's my professional opinion the board may grant the variance without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantial impairment to the intent and purposes of the zone plan and ordinances. The property has been previously developed for the residents and has been functioning for decades. The proposal will only improve upon the existing conditions by eliminating the existing nonconformities, providing more traditional access to the property, and provide an attractive dwelling at the prevailing front yard setback and be in keeping with the size and character of the surrounding neighborhood. It's important to note that the property does provide at least 200 feet of lot frontage, so the visual element of the project will remain within the context of the zone requirements. The proposal will function well for purposes of the zone, traffic circulation, and can be granted without substantial impairment to the zone plan and the zoning ordinance.
I have nothing further from Mr. O'Barra, so if the board has any questions.
I would like to ask about the deforestation that you apparently show on your proposed piece of space where you want to build the house that is properly conforming with all of the appropriate setbacks and so on. as I go through that area, it's fairly heavily treed along the road, and you've taken a piece of property where, with difficulty, you can see the house. You appear to have removed all of the trees in your new tentative plan, and it will therefore have a very different visual impact on that part of the town than is the norm along that side. As a planner, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
No, I knew you were going to, as I was looking at the exhibit on the drive over, I knew you were going to say that. It's really something that was prepared by the draftsman in our office. We just kind of knew that, you know, this existing area was going to be void of any vegetation at this time, and there will be some grading associated with these improvements, but I don't believe the level of trees that are shown here would actually be removed, because I think whoever would want to reside there would agree with you. They would tend to look for the preservation of more trees and privacy.
The ordinances say that if they remove trees, they have to replace.
Yeah, there's
The
a
equivalent.
one-for-one tree replacement. I think it's 8-inch diameter, chest high, and if you don't do that, there's a $400 per tree fee. So there's good incentive to
So
save
they
as
will
many
comply
trees
with
on
all
site.
of that.
Yeah,
as
that'll be
far as-
reviewed.
Yes,
The
tonight,
development,
and
yeah.
as I stated at the beginning, tonight we are just looking for variance. It's not site plan approval. The plan that's being presented is just for kind of just visual purposes. Obviously, aside from the variance we're looking for, our presentation is stating that we're going to comply with any and all other regulations at the time of site plan approval. So if there's something that requires one-for-one with respect to the trees, we'll obviously meet that.
Well, actually, since it's a single-family home, you're exempt from site plan approval. So the questions the board's asking you tonight, this is the opportunity they have to ask them. So-
Understood, and I will obviously at that point have to meet any and all requirements. If we didn't, obviously we have to come back. But
The other thing, again, that the board is normally concerned with in areas like that, well, there are two other things that I think we standardly worry about. One of them is light pollution, which in an area which is fairly well populated, one doesn't want to encourage. And so normally the board would condition a variance on having all exterior lights shielded so that the light source cannot be seen from off the property, and so that no light spillage from any of those sources goes over the property line. That's straightforward to do.
Yeah, I don't believe we have a problem.
And we would expect that type of thing to be adhered to. And the town engineer will worry about drainage. I don't know what the drainage is like in that area. It looked very dry when I drove past it the other day. But we are also very concerned about drainage from one property going on to an adjacent property. And with the amount of deforestation and grading and so on that looks proposed there, we would like you to be, we would condition an approval saying that that must be the situation. No runoff onto neighboring properties.
I think we can agree to that, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, may I jump in for a
Please.
second? So, Attorney Casey, you're saying that once the decision on the variance has been made, I mean, there is
That's
no site plan approval. And Mr. Bridger, you're saying there is the tree ordinance that needs compliance, I
Yeah,
assume, to be
yeah.
complied with. I assume that's going to be before the engineering and
So, yeah,
building.
typically, before it comes for zoning, you need the prior approval of any tree removal before it goes to engineering, and that's through the arborist, and then the engineer works with the arborist to see if, certain trees can be saved, and the trees that are left on site need to be protected. Then they also do the stormwater management plan. So that has to all be reviewed and approved before they can submit for a zoning permit.
Because if you notice, as the house moves into the center of the lot, of course, it gets significantly closer to the adjacent property and the adjacent house. So, you know, some forestation, but, you know, left between the two might really be something, it'd be interesting to hear what the neighbors have to say about that and what your thoughts are on, you know, how to comply with what the chairman's pointing out in terms of, you
Well,
know,
they have
the
to
visual perspectives of it.
We haven't
they have
had
to-
comments from the audience yet.
Yes,
so
of
maybe
course
we
not.
can-
But, yeah.
Of course, and I misspoke when I said site plan. I do apologize. I wasn't trying to mislead anybody. But obviously, as Mr. Bridger said, before any work is done, we do have to submit our plans to the engineering department and to the tree department and to stormwater and have all those things approved to make sure we are complying with all the township codes and regulations.
Looking at this existing condition map, I mean, is there an encroachment coming from the adjoining property into the property at issue in terms of that dotted green area? Do you see what I'm talking about? If you look at where the house, the neighbor's house is, there, it looks like there's lawn existing already that...
This area
Yes.
here?
Yeah.
That area just looks like it's clear. That's
Yeah,
all.
it's an area that looks like it's cleared, and why would that be cleared over there?
It's really just the existing tree line. You know, there may be just some understory shrubs, things like that.
Yeah, but that's not anything we can deal with. I mean,
No,
it's
no, it's
existing.
just, again, it's a curiosity as to why it's shown that way.
Or maybe for clarification, it looks like you took a Google map or something that was obviously satellited in the winter, and then you overlaid, that's not the actual forestation on the property, is it? That's just a simulation to show kind of like existing conditions, or?
Yeah, this is a tree line, so, I mean, the bulk of the property is pretty well forested.
I'm just saying, if you look at the adjoining property, all you see are trees without their leaves in the shadow, so I think that kind of
Yeah,
makes the picture look a little
Yeah.
starker,
I don't know,
you know,
it-
the dramatic difference between the two.
A lot has to do with the rendering of the drawing, but the issue is that you will comply with the tree ordinance. That will be reviewed by the engineer prior to the issuance of a building permit. So that really solves that, sure.
is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address this case? Yes? We'll provide you with a microphone. You can come to the lectern if that's a comfortable place, and you'll have to be sworn by our attorney.
Sir, would you first,
Yep,
It
works.
works.
sir, would you first state your name and address for the record?
My name is Thomas White. I live
You
at
have to hold the microphone up, so it is.
I live at 379 Mount Lucas,
All right,
which
and
is
now-
just down the street and barely in the 200-foot
Okay.
notification area.
All right, and then we just need you to raise your right hand so we could swear you in. Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Well, I'm not sure I'm doing testimony, but I'll
To the
try to be
extent, to the
truthful.
extent you do.
My first question was going to be about whether the bifurcation, and I guess this is not going to be bifurcated.
I have
Unless-
absolute difficulty hearing you. If
Oh.
you could make some compromise between the first blast and... hardly
I'm sorry.
anything.
I really have problems with this particular microphone. Anyway, my first question was going to be about bifurcating the application. And it looks like it won't be bifurcated
Right.
unless there's an additional variance needed. And actually, my second comment was going to be suggesting that it wouldn't be a bad idea to use the open area where the existing house is and cut down fewer trees towards that undersized lot to the north. But you would have to return to the board probably for a height setback ratio variance, or it might be likely that that would be needed. But at any rate, I think it would be a good idea to cut down fewer trees, use the open space that is available with the demolition of the existing house, and possibly turn the house not necessarily so it aligns with the road, but so that it fits on the site better. And
Okay.
the other question that I had, I think has been addressed, but is the applicant subject to that new tree ordinance? So it isn't just go in and freely cut down everything as the opening salvo for building. Okay. I really can't argue against the variance that's been requested. The lot has been in existence for umpteen years and is of a size that the newly applied or relatively newly applied RB zone requires. And the fact that on part of the lot it's slightly below what the width is calling for, or what the ordinance calls for in width is, I'd say, what's the term, de minimis?
Yeah.
That's a good term.
But at any rate, I would suggest to the applicant that they consider shifting the house, even though it might require another trip to the zoning board. But I think in the end, it would produce a better fit on the existing site. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on this case? No? If you don't want to, or you do? No, all right. I thought you were waving a hand to indicate you wanted to. He's just waving at you, all right. Okay. Do we have any further questions of
No.
the applicant?
I don't.
I have a quick question. When do you think you're going to move forward with the rest of the plan? As soon as possible?
As soon as possible, probably within the next few months.
Before the first 24-inch snowfall? Okay. Do you have anything you want to comment on?
No, Mr. Chairman, just that, to use Mr. White's word, he did have a very good word, it is de minimis, and I think the reason why we have the proposed plan the way it is that by moving the house, the new house, to where we are, we're trying to ask for the minimum number of variances we possibly could here to comply with the zone. And by doing this, we only really have to ask for that one, which really is, in Mr. White's words, de minimis, it's about less than 30 feet difference, and we would be able to comply with everything else. Obviously, if we tried to keep it where it is now, there'd be a slew more variances that would be needed, and we believe that this would best fit within the zone and comply with what the zone is looking for. So with that, I will going to ask the board to grant our application for a C1 variance with respect to this property. Thank you.
Good, thank you. What is your pleasure?
Well,
We've conditioned
yeah, as long as,
approval, I think.
I'd like to make a motion for approval, subject to the conditions, our standard conditions, light source, and drainage.
Yeah,
And in our approval, just our discussion of the depiction of the clear cutting of the site is going to be taken into consideration when the
What
final
the
plans
time
come in.
requires.
So I'd like to make a motion for approval.
so we have a motion to approve as conditioned.
We can have discussion still, right?
Sorry?
We can still have discussion.
If,
Yeah.
what, since we have a motion, we need a seconder, and then we can have a
Right.
discussion,
Second.
formally.
I second.
So we have a motion and a seconder. You wish to discuss?
Yeah, I was thinking earlier, and yet I'm not sure that but I was thinking along the lines of, is this the only spot for this house? And it seemed to me that there was a little puzzle piece that could be put back in that, I can show you, but I can't show
Yeah,
everybody, I
but,
guess.
You want to move the house more back to where the wetland
That-
sort of extension?
It seems to me that that could be done, and you wouldn't have had to, I mean, I don't have a measuring tape, or, I didn't go out to measure it, but it seems like you wouldn't have even had to ask for this. You might have had the 200 feet there, although I'm not sure that it would be a good solution for those of us who want to have a de minimis cutting down of trees and the least amount of impervious surface there. So there would be a trade-off there, but the idea, which I wonder if it's even something we could do, of having it on the side I mean, that's not what you all have proposed, but it's an interesting thought in terms of minimizing the amount of trees going down and preserving some more privacy next door. But this may be out of our
I see what you're
range, but I'm bringing it up, maybe not as a very clear question, but maybe the question is, did you think, are there any other places that you considered, and if,
We did take a look at exactly what you're speaking about in terms of sort of putting it halfway into this second notch.
Yeah.
But the way the yard setbacks work, it actually comes up along this property line here and projects all the way back here. So this entire area, based on the setbacks, is precluded from being, having the house situated in that area. And then the wetlands line, the buffer line is right here. So there's actually a very small box in that second portion. I believe you're speaking about potentially putting the house in this area. So again, it would trigger the need for more variances or environmental permitting by disturbing some of the wetlands. So we did take a look at that. It's just something that it wouldn't accommodate the house and then any necessary grading around it without creating problems.
I believe you were trying to keep it kind of in sync with the other houses
Yes.
nearby as well, in terms of...
And just to keep a point, there's side yard setbacks. The way your ordinance reads, it's 1.5 times the maximum heights, and so we don't know the actual height of the structure. We took the maximum that was permitted by ordinance and applied that, and that's why these side yard setbacks are shown at 52.5. So if the typical house might be closer to 30, so the setback would be slightly opened up. So there'd be a little bit of leeway for someone to put this house a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. So in terms of tree preservation or maintaining some privacy to the neighbor, they do have a little bit of leeway, probably realistically more than what's shown on this plan. But we wanted to cover our basis and make sure there's no additional variances required.
Anyone else? Okay. So, oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Derek, maybe could you explain the setback to height ratio?
I can't hear what you're saying,
The line?
and we know we won't get it on the record.
You said it's 1.5 to 1 based on that's what your 52-foot setback is, whereas the actual setback's 30 feet. But obviously, a typical house in this neighborhood is probably going to be 30 feet, and then it's 1.5 times that. So it would be 45 or 52. I think there's not a height requirement, but the height to setback, I think he explained it correctly.
Well-
1.5 to 1.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but isn't a line drawn from the edge of the site at that angle allow you to move things to within that, if it's a 35-foot side yard, you're able to have something in the area of 26 feet?
No. No, the side yard setback is set.
No, but I mean the setback to height ratio.
But you can't violate the 30-foot side yard setback.
Right.
So I'm not following you.
Well, it sounds like he's suggesting that 35 feet, the height of the house at its highest point,
Okay.
might be right at that setback line.
No, he was saying it would be more like 52, correct?
Correct.
But there's a portion of the house, if it's lower, that could be closer. I'm
Correct.
just
Yeah.
saying that.
Yep. Yeah, if you only have a one-story garage or 1.5, you're correct. Yeah.
Okay. So let us call the roll as we have a motion and a second.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yes.
Thank you, it's approved.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. Ah, Mr. Top. Our next case is 30 Duran Avenue, which carried the case number Z1616-358. And this is a request for an extension because of a vast 2 pages of barriers to getting a permit issued, if I understand. Do you need to make any comments on this, Mr. Bridger, just for the record?
It's just a straightforward request for a extension. They expired a couple months ago, I believe, and I think that's all I have to add. He can explain the
Mr. Bridger,
details.
I'm sorry, I should have indicated before that the noticing for this is in order and the board has jurisdiction to consider this request. I was distracted. I apologize.
Thank you. So I don't really have anything to add.
No. So, Mr. Ty, you have to convince us that you've acted in good faith all this time.
So I'd like to have the witness sworn, and we can proceed with that very issue. Georgina Enrica is here, she was here with me last year, so if we
Ma'am,
could...
would you raise your hand? You swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful. Thank you.
So we were here last year and got a lot area variance, proceeded to develop a home, and I asked Georgina to put together a list of all the steps she took. I think she'll testify that she's not from town and that she found the process daunting, and she got into the building department and they were ready to go, and they realized that she was several days over the one-year limit to obtain that permit. So the request is that you extend enough time for her to get the permit. We'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen in the future, but I'd ask her to confirm what was written in the application as the action step she took, and just to confirm that that's true.
Yes, it's true. We had a lot of steps that we went through, a lot of hurdles that we had to jump over, and just as we got down to the wire to get our permit, we were just, I guess, a few days short. It's been very daunting trying to get through all the hoops that we've had to jump through.
Okay.
That's it?
That's it. It
Daunting.
seems to me that this is a very straightforward case.
So you're ready to pick up your building permit at this point, subject to this extension?
Unfortunately, now, after it being a year and it taking a lot of money of holding onto the property, I am probably not going to build on that particular lot now. It looks like that we're going to have to sell it. I do have somebody that is very interested, somebody that has already contacted me. They have all their plans ready to go, so if we get this extension, they're going to jump in and go right through, and they will be a lot quicker, I'm sure, at getting their permits. A lot of personal things with my father-in-law happened during all this time, and I can't take any more
Sure,
time.
that's fine, I understand.
All right. Substantively, I do remind the board that it was a lot area variance, that it was unanimously approved.
Yeah.
The basis existed as it does in so many cases. So extending the approval for the period involved is, I don't want to say...
What's the purpose of it, though?
Sorry?
If she's not going to build,
Well, but,
so someone else has...
but
the-
somebody else will. And so if all of the coming to the board and getting approval has been taken care of, then they can go ahead.
Yeah.
So,
With the same plan? Or with the same requirements?
There were no plans approved with this project.
Yeah.
They didn't have house plans at the time they had applied for the variance. And they can discuss whether the plans have been sold or, I don't, information.
As I remember it, you had a prefabricated house that was your goal, and it's now going to go somewhere else. So it didn't fit. There were issues about the 35-foot setback and so forth, so it's just, the whole thing was a disaster.
But obviously, the new house that'll get built, you don't know. You're selling the property, and the property then would have to conform to the approval.
Correct.
Yeah,
The one
okay.
issue that came up, and I think even since we were here, the ordinance has changed, but you may recall that the neighbors had said, will you set the house back 35 feet? And she
Yeah.
said, I'll set it back 35 feet. Derek read that.
that's in the deed, isn't it?
There's a deed restriction that it can't be closer to the street.
Yeah.
When we She realized that it needed to be a few feet further back than the 35 feet. Derek was concerned that the resolution didn't speak in terms of being any further back, whereas the new ordinance that was adopted, the prevailing front yard setback ordinance, allows for variation and in fact specifically says you can be further back than the prevailing setback, but not closer. And unfortunately, in our case, it was before that ordinance came into effect, and the 35-foot fixed limitation was a concern. I've spoken to the lawyer for the buyer and told him it's a 35-foot fixed line, even though under the new ordinance, you might be able to avoid that. But he said, no, that's fine, 35 feet fixed is okay with us. So
Sure.
that's all we know about it. I haven't seen their plans.
Fine.
So I understand, Mr. Bridger, so prior to the ordinance, the change in the ordinance, it had to be 35 feet, or
Well,
the variability allows for it to be deeper than that? Is that
Yeah,
what I'm
typically, in
understanding?
this zone, the setback is 25 feet, so you could be anywhere from 25 feet on back. There was concern in the neighborhood about neighborhood character, and they didn't want a house that was, out of the line of the existing houses that are there, so I believe it was the neighbor on the right commented on that, and it was, a decision was reached to honor a 35-foot setback, so.
Good. So we need a motion and a second, and we can vote.
John,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
And before we have comments, I'd just like to ask, is the sale contingent upon the variance being granted?
The variance being extended.
Yes, being extended. Is it?
Yes, they can't get a building permit without it,
No, but they could come in again, of course.
for the same relief, the slot area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but with the new ordinance in place.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
With the new ordinance in place.
Which would have
Ma'am, would you state your name and address for the record?
Danielle Rollman, 3 Doran Avenue.
And do you swear or affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the last time we were here, their neighborhood was out in force, and we did actually arrive at a set of conditions. I understand that things may have changed. I understand that they're going to sell the property, but could we ask that the same sets of conditions be written into the record as they were last time, and could we read those before you vote, please? Because the setback was pretty important to the neighborhood. I think there was something about trees that I can't remember, but anyhow, if we
But
could
that-
read those again.
But that whole approval is part of this. I mean, what they were given, the approval they were given, is we're basically extending that same approval. So there'll be no changes from that unless the new purchaser comes into the board and wants to try to make a change, and then again, the whole process starts again.
So I will take that as a testimony to the fact that it is, yes, the same setback in
Yes.
line with the properties, or behind it, sounds like, is now the new rule.
All the conditions that were granted before will be in effect after this is done.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Motion, second, vote.
I'll make a motion to
We
approve
have a
the
motion,
extension.
seconded for the motion?
I second.
Second. All right. Call the roll for us, please, Linda.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's approved.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sorry it took so long.
A nice early evening for you. Very good.
Okay. I don't think we have any other business.
No, sir.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
I'm sorry? The 2 pages.
Yes, you want to.
I'll be there.
Actually, I